We now present For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Will Keneally. Our sincere thank you to Braden Ross last week for hosting the show. Now we start this morning with the latest political news. Within a week of each other, both Harris and Trump traveled to Wisconsin. Now the latest trip coming from former President Donald Trump took him to Prairie du Chien in western Wisconsin.
38 days from now, we are going to win Wisconsin. We're going to defeat Kamala Harris, and we are going to make America great again.
Now, in just a few minutes, we will get an on-the-ground view of politics in Prairie du Chien with the local county Republican Party vice chair. But next, the rally's focus is on immigration, and it comes as Republicans are looking to campaign on the issue for the fall. It also goes hand in hand with rhetoric on crime as well. Now, for his perspective on this, we are joined by Democratic Attorney General Josh Kaul. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to acknowledge you are in your campaign capacity right now, but you also have your official hat that you wear as well. So now, as we look at Prairie du Chien, it's in the forefront right now in terms of immigration for the arrest of someone related to a domestic incident, but who also has some possible ties to transnational gangs. Now, as Wisconsin's essential top cop here, what is the status of transnational gang organization in the state?
Well, first, I'm here in my campaign capacity, as you said, and I think it's important to note that there is one candidate in this race who has actually prosecuted transnational gangs, and that's Kamala Harris. She has worked to hold people accountable for serious crimes as a prosecutor. And as somebody who is a former prosecutor myself, who has spent years working to hold people accountable for crimes, having somebody with that kind of experience is key. Now, she supports a plan for the border that would strengthen what we're doing at the border. Donald Trump worked to kill that plan to stop it from happening. It's some of the toughest border legislation that ever would have been passed. So we need a leader like Kamala Harris in office, both to help keep our communities safer and to be honest with people about what's going on, because we've heard a lot of rhetoric from Donald Trump, but that rhetoric has been, in a lot of cases, totally inconsistent with the facts.
Now, I do understand you can't necessarily acknowledge ongoing investigations, but do we see a lot of transnational gang activity in Wisconsin at all?
Well, speaking generally, there are a number of types of crimes that happen and that are investigated in Wisconsin. What I can say is a few things generally, though. First, when Donald Trump was president, we had a serious spike in homicides and shootings, and he brought chaos to the environment we were facing. He promised when he ran the first time to build a wall, and yet here he is 8 years later still talking about immigration. During Kamala Harris's time as VP, by contrast, we've seen a historic reduction in shootings and homicides. And that's not surprising, because with the Biden-Harris administration, we've had support for federal law enforcement, support for investments in local law enforcement. Donald Trump has tried to gut funding for federal law enforcement. He's attacked the FBI and federal prosecutors. So continuing to have leadership from Kamala Harris that's going to be supportive of public safety is critical.
Now, former President Trump did acknowledge actually a trip that Harris took to the southern border, and we have a clip from his speech that we can play back here.
Border Czar Harris went to the border to lie in the most shameless and horrible way possible, at the very site where she released so much suffering, misery, and death.
Now, we often hear from Republicans the line that every state is a border state or every county is a border county. How true is that here in Wisconsin?
Well, hearing that clip, let me just say, Donald Trump lies like he breathes. And what he left out of that discussion is why he personally intervened to kill, again, what would have been one of the toughest border bills in the history of the nation. Kamala Harris supports that bill. She worked to get it in place. It's Donald Trump who killed that bill from happening, because Donald Trump isn't interested in solving challenges we face. He is only interested in one person, and that's himself. That's why he killed that bill. And again, when it comes to keeping our communities safe, Kamala Harris has a track record of holding transnational gangs accountable and holding other dangerous offenders accountable. Donald Trump's experience in a courtroom is as a criminal defendant.
So you also heard another component of this, former President Trump talk about political violence. Now, this rally specifically had to move indoors because the U.S. Secret Service couldn't secure a larger rally, in part due to their efforts to secure the United Nations as well. Are we seeing anything in Wisconsin in terms of political violence, for example, like we saw in Michigan with the threat to kidnap Governor Whitmer over there?
Well, first, let me just say political violence is completely unacceptable. And I am absolutely committed to working with anybody I can to ensure that people who are part of the political process are safe. We've had a concerning rise in potential threats to election officials around the country, and it's critical that people know that if they threaten anybody who is working to administer our elections and they do so illegally, they're going to be held accountable. It's also critical for people to know that any interference with the ability of voters to cast a ballot is going to lead to accountability. Unfortunately, what we've heard from Donald Trump is shameful political rhetoric that encourages political violence, like jokes that he made about Nancy Pelosi's husband. We need people on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican, to condemn political violence and to make clear that it has no place in our democracy. That events like January 6th, where Donald Trump inspired the attack on our Capitol, can never happen in this country.
Attorney General Josh Kaul, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we go to break, I want to talk quickly about some of the behind the scenes of the show. Now, in journalism, we take the business of keeping discussions about advertising on a show like this very separate from the news content that we provide. I'll say from my personal experience too, WISC TV upholds that to the fullest extent. I'm never privy to any conversations about the ads that you see here on For the Record. Now this week though, the station did let me know that we are running an ad during this program that viewers may find disturbing. Now it comes from a presidential candidate, and we have certain federal obligations to not censor political speech in that regard. Now we're also dedicated here though to providing you greater context for what you see. And our Maddie Heimsch has more about this ad and why you'll see ads like it over the next few weeks.
Randall Terry, a presidential candidate for the Constitution Party, is on the ballot in 13 states, Wisconsin being one of them. That's why his ad showing graphic anti-abortion imagery will soon be shown on our air. And while some found the graphic images more disturbing than others, most had the same question. How is this allowed?
So what Congress wanted to do was to encourage free speech on broadcast stations for candidates. They didn't want to give broadcasters the opportunity to censor or to play political favorites.
So whether you agree or disagree with the message or how it's delivered, those candidates still have the right to air it.
So it leaves very, very no choice for local broadcasters. And that's a real struggle when the content of the ad flies in the face of the values of the local broadcaster.
That brings us to the big question. Will it affect the vote? Well, viewers we spoke to worry that it could.
It definitely would flip my vote around if I didn't know better to do my own research.
But experts say it's more likely that voters will simply turn away from the election as a whole.
I have a hard time seeing anybody reacting to this ad with anything other than disgust. So I doubt that it would be politically motivating, but it might be demotivating. So I'm so disgusted by the tenor of this election that I'm just going to stay home. That's the only outcome that I could envision.
As Maddie Heimsch reporting. Now, when we come back, we look more into the politics of Western Wisconsin and Prairie du Chien. We speak with the vice chair of the Crawford County Republican Party right after this.
This portion of News 3 Now is sponsored by Madison Gas and Electric.
Welcome back. Former President Donald Trump's visit to Prairie du Chien comes amid a focus on the western part of Wisconsin, especially on the Republican side of the ticket. VP candidate J.D. Vance has made 2 trips to Eau Claire within the last few months, and the former president held a town hall event in La Crosse, and then certainly ahead of that event in Prairie du Chien on Saturday. Now, for more on what the politics of Western Wisconsin look like, and specifically Prairie du Chien area, is Crawford County Republican Vice Chair David Westener, and thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So for people who don't know Crawford County, that area around Prairie du Chien, what's that part of the state like?
We'll steal La Crosse County's title of God's country. It really is just an extension of God's country on the Mississippi River, right where the Wisconsin converges in. And we're in that little triangle or kind of an angle where the rivers come together. Beautiful area. This fall, come over, and it's going to be a great season for looking at the leaves over here. Farming community, sportsman's paradise. I could work for the Chamber of Commerce. Very easy. It wouldn't be hard.
I was going to say, hiking Wyalusing State Park, kind of in that area, is certainly wonderful. I do want to. I do want to flip to the politics, though. Notably, Congressman Derek Van Orden is from Prairie du Chien. Is that a generally red part of the state?
I would say that Crawford County is, I would say it's the purplest of the purple. And there are strong feelings both way in the county. One thing that's nice, for the most part, you're going to have people that have strong feelings, but for the most part, we get along. I'm friends with the chairman of the Democrat Party in Crawford County, and though we may not see things the same way politically, we all get along in Crawford County, and that is nice. That is nice.
So now, how often do candidates campaign there? You think, state candidates certainly might make that swing through, but especially at the presidential level, have we seen former presidents campaign there?
Well, now there you go. We have a park in Prairie du Chien, and I encourage anyone that comes to visit it. It's called the Trail of Presidents, and actually 22 of our U.S. presidents have passed through Prairie du Chien, either campaigning, spent time living here. Some have lived here, and as well as 2 presidents from outside of other countries in the U.S. So Prairie du Chien, we're tickled pink because 45, hopefully soon to be 47, is going to be 23, meaning the 23rd president to visit Prairie du Chien, Crawford County. So yeah, for whatever reason, we've been blessed with having additional, a lot. I would say, it's going to be over half of our presidents will have visited Prairie du Chien.
Now, when you work kind of locally with voters and constituents there, what does that grassroots work look like in Crawford County? What are you hearing from voters? What do they care about this election?
I've been involved with, I retired down to Prairie du Chien in 2010 and been very active in the party, chairman for most of those years. Just became vice chairman earlier this spring in the elections. I said, I've had enough. It's time for a new chairman. And I have never seen, this is what we said 4 years ago when President Trump was running, that we just couldn't get over the excitement and enthusiasm. And now this year we're saying it again, only it's magnified. Usually it's a core root group of people in Crawford County that are the Republican Party. We have people that when we ask, we hold a lot of meet and greets, at least one or maybe twice a year, especially in the campaign cycles, where we'll invite all of the candidates, whether they're the statewide candidates or the local politicians. And it's funny because we will be just great attendance and people will come. Why they won't join, we know we can count on their votes, but people maybe just aren't joiners like the way they used to be, whether it's a service organization or whatever. But this year, the excitement, we have just a wonderful headquarters, and we wanted to keep it open just a couple of days a week. We can't because we're just being asked, when can you be here? When can you be here? So this has been the most involved election season that I've been involved in, and I've been involved in a lot.
Well, David Wessner, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And we'll be right back after this. Welcome back. Amid the election and focus on immigration, it also happens to be Hispanic Heritage Month. Now, Hispanic and Latino voters are a key and fast-growing voting demographic, which both political parties are looking to win over. Now, for more on this, we're joined by the national president of Ford Latino, Daryl Morin. Thanks for sitting down with us. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
So I kind of want to ask, are there any challenges to driving Latino and Hispanic turnout this election?
Well, traditionally, you find that the Latino and Hispanic vote has lagged the white, their white counterparts with regards to Latino engagement. But what we've been seeing over the last several election cycles are the Latino and Hispanic voters are really starting to catch up and make significant gains, and will be one of the largest voting blocks in this election period. So we're very excited and are actively engaged in boosting civic engagement and making people aware of how and where to vote, those types of things.
And my understanding, too, is it's traditionally been a fast-growing voting bloc. Is that still the case?
Yes, it is. It is one of the fastest growing blocks. And, if you look at the last statewide election cycle, we estimate over 100,000 Hispanics and Latinos voted here in Wisconsin. And when you look at the presidential race being decided last go around by about 20,000 votes, you can see the impact that the Hispanic and Latino voters will have on the outcomes of this presidential election.
We've seen some campaigns give some attention specifically to different demographic groups in Milwaukee specifically. Overall, have you seen campaigns try to engage more with Hispanic and Latino voters?
It's been one of the great frustration points for our community for some time. We have seen, though, over the last several election cycles, there are attempts to engage our community at a deeper level. But once again, it really comes down to you can't show up on the doorstep a few months before election and say, hey, we're here to win your support. We're much smarter than that. We like to see policies put in place that actually address our needs. So while we see a lot of campaign fluff at times, I don't believe it really has a sincere impact when it happens so late in the game and when we're not included in policy discussions.
I was going to say, too, what more would you want campaigns and then policymakers, once they're in office, do to kind of show that long support?
Yeah. Well, let's just say, and we're a 501c3, so we don't endorse a party or candidate, et cetera. It's very obvious when an administration wants to engage with us, et cetera, and when others don't. I can say that over the last 4 years, we've been very engaged with the current administration on policies and efforts. Sadly, the previous 4 years, we spent more time dealing with acts of hate against our community and a lot of other serious things that were happening. So, once again, we're really willing to open and work with everybody, but it needs to be an invitation to work together in earnest in order to earn the Latino vote.
Now, we've seen immigration play a role as a campaign issue, certainly this cycle. Does that, or the rhetoric that kind of goes along with that, impact Latino and Hispanic voters at all?
Yes, it does. Is immigration the number one issue in the Hispanic community? No, it isn't. It's inflation, access to health care, quality education, affordable housing, those types of things. But it is kind of like to use a poker analogy, the table stakes to sit down to show you're earnest in wanting to work with the community in earnest. Sadly, this inflammatory rhetoric, every time there's an election cycle, because the rhetoric has gotten so ugly and so disingenuous, we do find ourselves once again having to provide emergency relief services to people who fall victim to hate crimes, the overwhelming majority who are U.S. citizens. So yes, does the rhetoric play a role? Yes, it does. In how Hispanics and Latinos are going to vote? Yes, it does. But sadly, it goes much, much further beyond that to where we're literally seeing not just verbal abuse, but physical abuse take places against our fellow Americans. And I think anyone who believes in what American stands for should denounce that and say that that is wrong and that we're better than this and won't let that type of activity stand.
So we've also seen both candidates take trips down to the U.S.-Mexico southern border. How does that shape the issue of immigration on this campaign?
So there's been a lot of talk about an open border down on our southern border with Mexico. I will share this with you. I have toured the border both on the Mexican side and on the U.S. side, and not just for a few hours at a time, but spent deep, meaningful time there to see the issues happening. The issue isn't that we have an open border. The issue has been that for a series of months, it's been overwhelmed and in desperate need of additional resources. We were very pleased when we saw the administration work with Senator Langford and another group of Republican leaders in Congress to put together what we think was the most comprehensive and impactful security bill possible that would have an immediate impact on the flow of fentanyl and other things that were coming through our ports of entry. I'll only say we're very disappointed when we saw the Republican candidate for the President of the United States pick up the phone and call leadership in Congress on the Republican side of the aisle and kill that bill. That is of great frustration. And I think Mitt Romney put it best when he said, it's hard to believe that a Republican candidate for President of the United States would literally kill a bill that would have improved security of our country for his own political advantage. So I tip my hat to Senator Romney for being willing to stand up and say what has been happening here recently.
So we're both a few weeks out from the presidential election, but also in the midst of Hispanic Heritage Month. Do you have any message that you'd want viewers to keep in mind in the next couple of weeks here?
Yeah, this is a great time, opportunity to get to not only is it a celebration of our culture, obviously, but it's a great opportunity to bring other communities in to engage with us, to learn more beyond just the food and the music that everyone is so familiar with. There's so much, you know, America really is a rich tapestry of cultures and ethnicities and races from across the world. It really is a great time to come together and celebrate what does truly make America great. So I invite everyone to participate in any activities that you have going in your local city or town and get to really, enjoy and cherish the diversity that we have here in our great state.
Our conversation there with Daryl Morin. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. We also have a preview for you of next week's continued 3 for the People election coverage. Chris Stanford takes a look at the 2 Madison school referendum questions voters will see on their November ballots and help answer questions that voters still may have. And that does it for us this week. I'm Will Keneally. Have a great rest of your weekend.
This has been For the Record.